Injuries might be the excuse, but that isn't the reason the Pelicans lost to the Brooklyn Nets. I'll tell you who's to blame for the Pelicans' fifth straight loss, and it has to do with crunch time issues. It's the Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all after the Pelicans lose to the Brooklyn Nets 107-105 on Monday night. And yes, there are a lot of injuries for this team, but that is not at all why they lost this game. Has to do with them not scoring for the final 3.5 minutes of this one. We're going to break down the crunch time woes for the Pelicans. We'll look at Trey Murphy's return and how they used him and didn't use him. And then we'll look at Yves Missi, Brandon Boston Jr., and Brandon Ingram and look at their performances on the night. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So let's get into this one because, oh boy, this was not a great performance from New Orleans in this game, losing to the Brooklyn Nets 107-105. And look, there's a lot of injuries here. There's a lot of injuries here. And that is a big part of why this team isn't performing well. Don't get me wrong, but this was a winnable game. The Pelicans lost by 2. They had a lead with 3.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and then didn't score at all for the final 3.5 minutes. For the final 3.5 minutes here, they went 1 for 9 from the field, 0 for 3 from deep, with just 2 total points. That's counting a Brandon Boston Jr. dunk. And then after that, it was zip. So if we go beyond that here, they're going to be 0 for 8. 0 for 8 was their offense over the final 3.5 minutes of this game. Absolutely nothing going on in the half court. They even missed a score in transition. But truthfully, we can point to the injuries. We can say that. But the Pelicans were in position to win this game. They were leading in this game. They had a chance to win this one, and they did not execute down the stretch. Now, that's what Willie Green said after, but here's my question. What were they supposed to be executing down the stretch here? When you look at them play, what are they supposed to do? That looked like a team that did not have any sort of game plan. And this goes back to what I talked about with this team when they were on that 4-game road trip to start the year. They looked unorganized. They didn't look like there was a plan there. And I was saying we need to have a conversation about head coach Willie Green and maybe making a change. Then they came home, had that 4-game road trip, basically no Zion Williamson throughout most of that. And I thought played better, showed some fight, showed some offensive concepts, different things. You didn't see that in this game. They just kind of reverted here to what they were. If you look at their shot chart in the final 3.5 minutes, so 0 for 8 here, they missed 1 shot at the rim. That was in transition. They took 1 other shot. So let's go. It's 0 for 7 when you don't count the transition opportunities. Of those 7 shots, 1 was in the restricted area. Another one was in the paint, but was a contested mid-range jumper. Another 2 were mid-rangers that were outside of the paint, inside of the three-point line. And then another 3 were three-point shots that they missed. This isn't good. Well, it did not look like there was any sort of game plan. And before you go, oh, well, they're undermanned, all of that. Like, yes, but here's the thing. You know, their play calls and what we saw from them over the final 3.5 minutes, there were multiple timeouts and there were multiple after timeout plays. ATOs is what those are called. And they couldn't draw up a good look. It really just was Brandon Ingram dribbling the air out of the ball and then dribbling into a contested mid-range jumper and forcing a tough shot that didn't go down. There wasn't offense. There weren't offensive actions. Go to basically that final possession. You had Brandon Ingram dribbling the ball, coming down from the three-point line, and dribbled into two guys, and then he kind of kicked it out behind him to Javonte Green, who took a three. Basically, his time expired. And not exactly that, but you know what I'm talking about if you watch the game. And he missed it. Trey Murphy was standing in the corner by himself, like away from the ball. Why not replace Trey Murphy and Javonte Green there and keep Trey Murphy closer to the ball? We'll get more into Trey Murphy and how he was used in the next segment here. But you could have drawn up something better. If you're coming out of a timeout and it's a mid-range jumper for Brandon Ingram, or to try and get Brandon Ingram to the rim off of just a weak screen with no other ball movement, this is a failure here, right? Like, yes, talent wasn't good here, but over those final 3.5 minutes, it's not like you saw tremendous play from the Brooklyn Nets, who are running out Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton, Zaire Williams, and Cam Johnson. This is not exactly a known, defensive lineup. You didn't have Ben Simmons in there. This was a game that you should have won, and poor crunch time execution is what really caused you. 0 for 8 there. You can't do that. I don't care about the injuries. You've got to run some semblance of offense and look better, and they weren't. If that's Brandon Ingram just being like, I'm going to do it myself, then you've got to pull him in a game like this and actually put guys out there that are going to play. And Brandon Ingram, despite a good first half, did not play particularly well in the second half. He did not make a field goal in this game. In the second half. He was 0 for 5. He made 2 free throws. That was it. 5 assists, which was good. And his passing in this game was pretty slick overall. And I think he's been really good this year. But this is a failure all around to try and just generate some looks, some offense. This has been the problem, right? We'll get in more in Trey Murphy. They were trying to take away his airspace, not let him get shots off. Sure. But there's ways to counter that, and the Pelicans didn't do it in this one. Brandon Ingram isn't getting it going with 0 for 5. Well, then do something. Right? This is where Brandon Ingram has a valid claim of you got to help me in some capacity. Ingram didn't take, of those 5 shots, Ingram took one of them in the paint. And it was one of those fourth quarter mid-range jumpers that's contested in the paint. He didn't get to the rim once. You've got to draw up some stuff for him. Now, it's on him too to take over and not rely on all of those mid-rangers, because that was a big problem. And yes, they go down, but that is not going to be great looks. And you can't rely on that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had these issues in the fourth quarter. This is a failure all around. Look, I'm not going to expect the Pelicans this shorthanded to beat many teams. When they play Denver on Friday or OKC on Wednesday or even the Lakers on Saturday, my expectation isn't that they win. This game, though, my expectation was that they win. And then they're injured. That's what the team would say. Dumb Matt, you were up. You were winning with 3.5 minutes to go, and then you didn't score anymore. Don't tell me, well, you shouldn't expect it when you got in position to do that, right? They were up 4 with 3.5 minutes to go, and they couldn't close the game. It goes back to what I said on the road trip. If you were losing close games, but you were playing well and it just didn't go your way, that's one thing. When it's you look terrible, that's not going to be okay here, right? Let's go through the rest of their shots from 3:35 on. At 3 minutes and 3 seconds, Brandon Ingram misses a 25-foot three-point jump shot. Then Javonte Green misses a 2-foot layup, whatever. Ingram misses a 17-foot fadeaway jumper that was contested. Boston missed a 3-point jumper. Trey Murphy misses a 20-foot fadeaway jumper as time expires. That's at 48 seconds, right? You get the rebound, and then they miss the tip-in. 22 seconds. Ingram misses a 13-foot floating jump shot. These aren't good looks at all for the team. Then there was that missed jumper with 4 seconds left by Javonte Green, almost like kind of as a panic bailout, they kicked it to him. This isn't how you're going to win games. This has to change. When Willie Green comes to the press conference after, and I listened to it, and he goes, well, we just didn't execute. Again, what were you trying to execute there? If your offense is designed to get, a mid-range jumper with 7 seconds left on the shot clock, that's not going to do it. That's not executing the right things here. This was a complete failure on this part. That final play, you have Brandon Ingram, you have Trey Murphy, and Trey's not involved in the action whatsoever. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? I'm not saying you need to fire head coach Willie Green, but this is not something that's just gone on this season. If you want to defend the team with injuries, that's fine. I get it. I think that's a big part of this. But we saw similar issues last year. We saw similar issues the year before that, right? This isn't just an 11-game sample size now. This is something that has been a repeated issue. That's where I have a problem with it. You're making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and it does not appear that you are learning from them. That's not going to get it done. And that's why the Pelicans are now on a 5-game losing streak versus a 1-game winning streak and getting off that slide, particularly at a very difficult point of their schedule. This season, and I'm not going to say it is this, is starting to look, not saying it is, starting to look a little bit like maybe it's over before it even began, partially because of the injuries, but also because of these problems. This was a winnable game. We'll get more into that in a little bit and then look at Trey Murphy. That's coming up here next. I want to share a couple of other stats for you from this game that I think are really important. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. That's the absolute worst. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. So when Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan's jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with a premium wireless plan starting at $15 a month. And all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. So ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba to cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you every single day, breaking down exactly what you want to know about this team and why the Pelicans lost this game against the Brooklyn Nets. You can also get more Pelicans content in your inbox here with the new Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. One-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now over at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Trust me, open up some eyes over at the Locked On host is how many subscribers the Pelicans one has gotten, beaten out a lot of big market teams. Let's keep that momentum going. We got to get some wins here. Let's get them on the newsletter because I don't know if the Pelicans are necessarily going to be getting them anytime soon. So I want to keep talking about this loss to the Brooklyn Nets, 107-105. The Pelicans did a lot of what they needed to do in this game. And it's truly the crunch time offense is what screwed them up, and they weren't able to kind of come back from that here. But there were some other things that we should talk about. The Pelicans won the points in the paint battle by a good margin. This is something that they've been struggling with. They need to control the paint offensively and defensively. They have not been doing a good job of that. They won the points in the paint 52-28. They won the fast break points. Easy offense in transition, right? 23-6. They only had 10 turnovers in this one, and they forced 16 for the Brooklyn Nets. By all accounts, they should have won this game, except when you look at a couple of areas and you go, oh yeah, that's still a problem. The 3-point battle was not something that the Pelicans won. Like I said, we just went over the numbers here. They should have run away with this one, it feels like. Except they took only 33-point attempts in this one. Credit to Brandon Ingram, who took 9. The shot wasn't falling. It was 2 of 9 from deep. 24 points, 22 of those in the first half. 9 assists, 5 rebounds. Overall, he was good till crunch time, where I don't think he or Willie Green did anybody any favors here. But you've got to take more than 10 threes. It's really as simple as that. This is something they actively need to work more on. And some of it is the limitations of the players, right? Your starters, Ingram took 9, Murphy took 6, Brandon Boston Jr. 4, Jose Alvarado 4, Yves Missi none. Your bench took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The bench needs to take more. Javonte Green needs to take more than 3 of them. Jalen Noel loves those mid-rangers, but he's got to take more than 2 3-pointers. Same for Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I get it that those guys aren't like elite 3-point shooters or volume 3-point shooters, but if you can't do it then, try and find a way to get Trey Murphy more than 6. He took 14 shots in this game. You've got to do that. You lost the 3-point battle, 10 of 30 compared to 19 for 42. You want to know where the Nets equalized this game and won it? It's right there, along with the Pelicans in crunch time situations. They should have won this game. They didn't. And that's super disappointing because it's a game you really needed to get, because you're now on a 5-game losing streak, and this is going to probably escalate, hopefully not more, but easily could. And yes, there are injuries, but I want to look at Trey Murphy's play in this game. Look, it's his first game back from injury, and I told you we should not expect, anything insane from him here. And I thought he did a good enough job. 4 of 14 is not great, but 2 of 6 from 3. You saw the rebounds. You saw him try, and he had 2 blocks. He was overall good, 12 points in this. You know what? We'll give it to him on the first game back that maybe you're rusty, your shot's not falling. But only 6 3-pointers? And now, here's what the Pelicans would tell you about that. Well, they were game planning for him. The words they would use is they're taking away his airspace. And yes, they were. You could see it from the opening tip with Trey Murphy out there that he was on the scouting report, and that the Brooklyn Nets knew the threats here were going to be Brandon Ingram, Brandon Boston Jr., and in Trey Murphy in this game, right? Like that was the guys that they needed to try and take away. And they really focused on making life difficult for Trey Murphy. They were going over on screens. They were doing everything they could to try and limit him here. And they did a very good job of that. But we've seen this before, right? We've seen this with Jordan Hawkins before, where one game they kind of mark him out. That was the Golden State Warriors. And then you come back and play Atlanta when you have even fewer guys, and they can key in on him more, and you ran him through multiple screens. You ran him through multiple actions. That's what the Pelicans did. That restored some of my faith in head coach Willie Green. Why didn't you do that in this game? They were not running plays for Trey Murphy. They were not running plays at all for Trey Murphy. They've done it for Jordan Hawkins. Why can't you do it for Trey Murphy? And here's the thing, right? Like there's other ways you can use him beyond just being a 3-point shooter. Look, if they're guarding him that much, you've got to have him try and cut to the basket for lobs and things like that. Get behind his guys as they're just facing him, where they don't know where the ball's coming from or what he can do, and he can just leap above them, right? They're not going to defend a lob unless they realize a lob is happening. And when they're so focused on him and not letting him get an inch of space, you can do that. They need more of that sort of thing, and they don't do it. Trey could have taken more than 6 threes. Look, I'm not really complaining about Trey Murphy as a player and how he played. Not at all. We're not there yet. Nor will it probably be this season. I think he's really good. But this team did themselves no favors. Again, all of the injuries, sure. But run your sets, run your actions, run plays for Trey. Run the same things you freaking ran for Jordan Hawkins, but didn't in this game. If he misses the shots or if they defend those well, that's one thing. But look, I'll know. We'll see it if they're defending them well. And that wasn't happening here. The Pelicans were just doing nothing. How do you have multiple out-of-timeout plays and not get one good look for Trey Murphy? Or really anybody for that matter, right? That is a coaching thing. That is why I was potentially calling for Willie Green to be fired after that 4-game road trip where you saw them just look lifeless, listless, all of the less words, right? That's not okay here. It's one thing if you're losing because the team is more talented, and that was on that 4-game homestand, I thought. They were losing because they just ran out of steam at the end, but they were close in this one, right, in those games. This is one you just should have won. You didn't run out of steam against this team. You just didn't have good offense. I'll be able to pull the shot clock data usage numbers on all of this later, but it's going to be pretty telling, I think. And this was a pretty rough one to see and a really disappointing loss for New Orleans when wins might be tough to find a little bit later on. You had to get this one. It was there for the taking, and you just didn't do it. There, right now, appear to be deeper issues than just some of the injuries. We saw that on the road trip. I thought they looked a little bit better at home. And now you're back at home. We'll talk more about the Zion injury tomorrow. I have some more insight to share when it comes to all of that and want to talk about that more. But this one was bad. Like, I'm not even, you heard it probably in the first segment where it was a little bit more fiery. Now I'm just kind of like resigned to it because this is a team that needs to, again, Willie Green's there saying like, oh, we just didn't execute. Execute what? Execute what? What was the play? What were you trying to do? It's one thing if it happens once, but multiple times after timeouts, when you can draw up a play and do it. I'm sure Willie Green's drawing up a play. Is it the right one? Does it utilize the players well? That's my big question here. And that's what's so frustrating about this loss. It's not that it's a loss. That's expected right now with the team being this injured. It's how they lost. And that's not great. There were some bright spots, though. Let's end on positive notes here with Yves Missi and Brandon Boston Jr. Yves Missi making an impact all over the frickin' place. 17 points, 11 boards. Brandon Boston Jr. didn't shoot well, but I liked something that we saw out of him, and that was pretty good. Let's talk about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So get ready to take on all the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. The lines are constantly updating as the game goes on, so if you feel momentum swing, you can jump on that right away and get a big payout. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And all you need to do is just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Nets ended up -1 on this game. They won by 2. You took the -1, you'd be feeling really good right now. And you'd have $150 in bonus bets after your first $5 bet. You can do that over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well here. And for your second listen, Locked On Saints. New head coach, new positive energy, and a win over the Atlanta Falcons here. Ross Jackson going to make sense of everything black and gold. I'm actually going to be hanging out with him tonight. I'm looking forward to it. Also, shout out Theo Mitchell, who's going to be joining us. Going to be a lot of fun here, even when the team's losing, but I love all of these folks, so please go support them. Go listen to Locked On Saints as your second listen, part of the Locked On Podcast Network every day. So let's get into a couple of positives here in the Pelicans loss, 107-105 to the Brooklyn Nets. And oh boy, Yves Missi looked the part in this one, didn't he? 7 of 8 shooting, 3 of 4 from the line, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, a block, and just 1 foul, 17 points. That's his first career double-double here. 17 and 11 is pretty good. He looked awesome in this game, showing off more range offensively, getting some of those putbacks, a mix of offense and defensive rebounds here. 3 offensive, 8 defensive, making plays on the defensive side of the ball. Feels like he had more than 1 block in this game. Also got injured, came back. That's good to see. Look, he looks the part of a starting center. He looks the part of a starting center. You'd like some range on offense. You know, if your other best player was a guard that shot threes or a wing that shot threes instead of, Zion Williamson, who doesn't, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, Missi would be like perfect fit here. And I think even that fit from what you're seeing from him right now can really work with Zion because he is an above the board threat. He's an above the rim threat, as a lob threat here. He looked really good in this one. And there was a stretch in the third and fourth quarters where he just took over the game. Blocking a shot, getting down on the other end, and putting it up for the dunk. Those are the type of things you want to see from him. Getting to the line, making his free throws. I'm continually impressed with the way that he plays. And when you look at him in terms of the fouls, that was my biggest concern. I thought he was going to never be on the court because he fouled too much. And it turns out that's not the case, at all. He's been so good about that. Summer League, that first preseason game, foul machine. And then he's just worked on it and improved. And you can see the improvement on a game-to-game basis from him. He looked awesome in this one. This is a guy that should be starting going forward. A good bounce-back game after struggling against the Orlando Magic here. I think when you get Herb Jones and DeJounte Murray back, this defense will look significantly better. And I think that's only going to make Yves Missi look even better. So I'm excited when this team eventually gets healthy that you're going to really see Yves Missi shine. And we're going to look back on this season, particularly with him, as a guy that is a core piece going forward. Brandon Boston Jr. also looks like a guy that will be in the rotation going forward. Getting another start tonight, 35 and a half minutes. The shooting wasn't there. He was 3 of 13 from the field, 23% for just 7 points. But here's the thing, and this is what I love about these type of players, that if their shot's not falling, they find a way to make an impact in other areas. And Brandon Boston Jr. did that in this game. Shot wasn't falling, the scoring wasn't there. Can you make an impact in other ways? And there were 2 areas that he did. One was on the defensive glass. 6 defensive boards for a guy at the guard position is really good. But also, and 3 steals. He was active on the defensive side of the ball, trying to poke the ball loose, getting out in transition and running. You saw that from him. Reflects it in the Pelicans, fast break points. But 10 assists, career high for him. He was looking for others. This is the type of guy that goes, oh, the defense is keying in on me. Right? We said there's 3 threats here. It's Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, Brandon Boston Jr. Okay, they're keying in on Brandon Boston Jr. He realizes it. Pass the ball. Move the rock, find the open man. He did that in this one. Those 10 assists aren't a fluke. He played well and was able to impact the game. When you look at the starters, basically, outside of Jose, he was the guy that had the best plus-minus. It was -1, so it's not great, but he was doing his best and wasn't one of those liabilities on offense. Usually if you see a guy go 3 for 13, you're going to be like, oh no, the plus-minus is going to be bad. It wasn't in this game. He looked really good. He played particularly well. I'm very pleased with what we saw from Brandon Boston Jr. in here. He shouldn't be a starter, but he should be a guy off the bench. Again, Kevin Martin is my NBA comp for him. I really like that. Good for Brandon Boston Jr. He's revived his NBA career. It's really cool to see. So hopefully they get healthy and he can go to a role that's a little bit better suited for him. But he's been doing a really, really good job here in New Orleans so far. Brandon Ingram did pace this team in the first half of the game. He looked really good before struggling in the second half. First half of this one, he had 22 points, 10 of 19 shooting, 2 of 7 from 3. Credit to him for realizing his three-point shot wasn't falling and still shooting some of them. They've got to cut some of those mid-range shots out. Those are too tough. You're not always going to consistently make those, and that's not a way to win games in the fourth quarter. But look, they were close at halftime. That was a big important thing. Was it tied at halftime? They were up 2 at halftime. And it was the major part of that, really leading the team and pacing the team. Then the defense is keyed in on him a little bit more. That's where it's on him and head coach Willie Green to try and figure it out. Look, it's a loss. It sucks. They should have won this one. They've got to figure out these crunch time woes, and they need to basically decide what they're going to do and who they're going to be. But it's another loss, 5-game losing streak. Pelicans have a chance on Wednesday against now an injured OKC team to really maybe make some noise, get back in the win column, and I think there's potential there. We'll look at that a little bit in tomorrow's show. I want to look more at the Zion Williamson injury. I'm going to share some insight on that, kind of what's going on there, what it means going forward, long-term forward for the team, and I'll tell you. That's coming up in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.